It often begins in the quiet moments, the seconds just after we've made a mistake, spoken too harshly, or let someone down. There's that sinking in the chest, a tightening of breath, and then, almost reflexively, the voice inside starts its cruel work. How could you? What's wrong with you? It's strange how automatic it feels, this inner condemnation, as if we believe deep down that self-criticism is what will make us better. But what if it doesn't? What if, instead, what we truly need is the very thing we deny ourselves the most? This is where Kristin Neff's self-compassion enters, not as a gentle suggestion but as a quietly revolutionary idea. That being kind to ourselves, especially when we fall short, isn't weakness. It's the very foundation of real strength. Reading Neff's book feels less like receiving advice and more like having a deeply honest conversation with someone who has lived what they teach. Neff doesn't write as someone perched above human struggle. She writes from within it, candidly sharing her own moments of shame, frustration, and self-doubt. She invites us to see that self-compassion isn't about ignoring our flaws or excusing harmful behavior. It's about meeting our pain with the same understanding we would instinctively offer a friend, and realizing, perhaps for the first time, that we are just as worthy of kindness as anyone else. What struck me most was Neff's insistence that self-compassion is not self-pity or self-indulgence. It doesn't mean letting ourselves off the hook or refusing to take responsibility. Instead, it means being honest about our imperfections without letting them define us. It's acknowledging our failures while remembering that failing doesn't make us failures. This subtle shift, Neff shows, changes everything. It softens the sting of mistakes, quiets the punishing inner monologue, and frees us to try again, not because we fear condemnation, but because we genuinely care about our growth. I remember one story Neff shares about sitting in meditation and becoming overwhelmed with self-criticism. Her teacher gently suggested she place her hand over her heart and silently repeat kind words to herself, as she would to a suffering child. At first, it felt unnatural, even silly, but as she kept doing it, something softened inside. Reading that, I paused, letting the image settle. How often do we, in our lowest moments, instinctively reach for self-attack rather than self-soothing? It's as if we believe kindness will make us weak, when in reality, it's the fuel that helps us keep going. Neff's writing is beautifully direct. She draws on psychological research but never hides behind jargon. Her voice feels steady and clear, like someone guiding you across a narrow bridge over troubled water. She explains the three components of self-compassion: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Each is deceptively simple, yet together, they form a practice that can transform how we experience suffering. It's not about erasing pain but changing how we relate to it, so it becomes something we can hold rather than something that crushes us. The idea of common humanity, in particular, stayed with me. It's the recognition that imperfection is part of being human, that everyone struggles, everyone stumbles. In moments of shame, we often feel isolated, as if we alone are flawed. But self-compassion reminds us that suffering is something we share, not something that separates us. This simple realization can make a world of difference. It turns a lonely "what's wrong with me?" into a softer "this hurts," and others have felt this too. It doesn't remove the pain, but it makes it feel lighter, less suffocating. Neff doesn't pretend that practicing self-compassion is easy. For many of us, self-criticism has been a constant companion for years, maybe decades. It feels familiar, even protective. She acknowledges the discomfort that can arise when we first try to be kind to ourselves. The skepticism, the resistance, even fear. But she also gently insists that we keep trying, because the alternative is to keep living under the weight of our own harshness. What makes this book so moving is that Neff writes not just as a researcher, but as someone who has lived through real pain. The struggles of raising a child with special needs, the moments of anger and guilt, the unexpected tenderness that follows. Her vulnerability makes the practice of self-compassion feel human and attainable, rather than an abstract ideal. As I read, I found myself thinking back to times I had been my own worst critic, replaying conversations, obsessing over small mistakes, punishing myself long after anyone else had forgotten. What if, instead, I had paused and offered myself kindness? It feels almost absurd to imagine, yet deeply relieving. The book makes a quiet but radical suggestion. That compassion isn't something we have to earn. It's something we deserve simply because we are human. Neff also explains how self-compassion actually helps us grow and change. It sounds paradoxical at first. How could being gentle with ourselves help us improve? But when we look closely, it makes sense. Self-criticism often paralyzes us, making us afraid to fail again. Self-compassion, by contrast, gives us the courage to face our flaws honestly, because we know our worth doesn't depend on perfection. We become more resilient, not less. More motivated to do better, not out of fear, but out of genuine care for ourselves and those around us. One passage that particularly resonated with me was Neff's reminder that self-compassion isn't just for the dramatic, life-changing moments. It's equally vital in small, everyday frustrations. Spilling coffee, missing a deadline, losing our temper. Each of these moments is an opportunity to practice. Instead of tightening into self-judgment, we can pause, breathe, and offer ourselves a few words of kindness. Over time, these small choices add up, gently rewiring the way we treat ourselves. By the end of self-compassion, I didn't feel like I had finished a book. I felt as though I had been given permission to be imperfect, to be human, to extend to myself the same warmth I so easily offer others. And in that permission, I felt a softening, the beginnings of a different relationship with myself. Reflecting on Neff's message now, I see that self-compassion isn't about escaping responsibility or denying our flaws. It's about accepting ourselves as we are, while still caring enough to grow. It's about remembering that we, too, are deserving of understanding and care, especially in our most broken moments. In a world that often tells us we are never enough, Neff's voice feels like a hand reaching out, reminding us that we already are. That the measure of our worth isn't how few mistakes we make, but how gently we can hold ourselves when we do. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of all. That real strength isn't found in perfection, but in the tender courage to love ourselves, even and especially when we feel most unlovable. And so, when the voice of self-criticism inevitably returns, as it always does, I find myself remembering Neff's words. I pause, I breathe, I place a hand over my heart, and quietly I say, it's okay, you're human, let's try again. It's a small act, almost invisible to anyone else. But in that moment, I feel something shift inside, a softening, a warmth. And I remember that self-compassion isn't a destination. It's a practice, renewed every time we choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment. And in that choice, moment by moment, we begin to come home to ourselves.